Hello and welcome to Building Tomorrow's Insurer, the podcast where we dive into the people, platforms and ideas reshaping insurance from the ground up. I'm your host, Nigel Fellowes-Freeman, the founder and CEO of Kanopi, and today I could not be more excited to be joined by a business leader who has shaped insurance strategy and operations not just in Australia but across Asia, and that's none other than Marc Crossman. He's the Group Executive General Manager of Distribution and Strategy at UAA. And look, Marc, I could not be more excited to have you here today, so thanks so much for your time.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
I'll give a little, just a snapshot of some of the research I've done, Marc, and it looks like you've got pretty broad experience across underwriting, distribution. Obviously, you're doing a bunch of work in leadership now, and I think that brings with it lots of challenges around balancing growth, operational discipline. How do you drive people? And so hopefully we can spend a lot of time on that, because I think that's from my perspective, I think it'll be some of the key learnings that you have that I'd love you to share today.
Happy to.
Awesome, mate. And Marc, I think a good story starts at the beginning, and so I would like to start there with you, if that's okay. And everyone's got interesting stories of how they got into the industry, and so I'd love to hear yours. How did you arrive in the insurance sector?
I mean, it is I guess in many ways an interesting story, but in many ways it is that old cliche term. I did fall into it, as everyone says. It was definitely not something I grew up and worked my way through high school with this plan of entering insurance, and what a wonderful job and career that would be. Definitely not the case. I actually didn't finish year 12. I left school about 3 months before year 12 exams. Just school wasn't for me. I was good at it, good grades, but just didn't, engage in it. I learnt by listening. I distract everyone. It was painful for me. I found more value. I worked from the age of 14, just Thursday night, Saturday retail stuff in hardware, customer service based sort of roles. And I found more engagement there. And I very quickly in that year 12 sort of time frame made the call, I just not really liking this. And I tried to finish it, knowing how valuable obviously it is. But yeah, after talking to my parents, I decided to leave school. And one condition my parents had was to make sure that I'm working. They understood that I wanted to gain life experience by working and figure out what I wanted to do. And I had to be working. That was their only criteria. Otherwise, they'd push back the study thing. And I went into a sales-based role. So I was working at Bunnings Hardware. At that stage, I converted it to part-time and took over the paint section. Was my little gig as a 17-year-old, and I did that for about another 6 months, and then moved to a sales role, doing expos around Australia. So a fair bit of travel and commission-based, and was quite successful at it, but got sick of being away from family and friends, and went back to decided to move back to Adelaide. And then parents very quickly reminded me of the condition that I had to be working. I was welcome back, but had to find a job. And I genuinely went on Seek that night and found an advert for Zurich as a trainee claims manager / mailroom attendant. Back when I started, despite my youthful looks, it was fax machines and mail that had to be stamped, sorted, and a trolley wheeled around and delivered out. And it said no experience necessary. I was like, I can do that for a little bit till I figure out what I want to do. And here we are, 21 years later.
The insurance industry sucked you in and kept you there. Marc, I was a little similar to you. I did a lot of, I worked young and had a lot of part-time jobs. I was busting at the chops to get out there and start doing things. And I know I did a couple of roles, just as you mentioned, around sales and commission only roles. And when I reflect on it, I actually think those jobs taught me an enormous amount. It taught me an enormous amount of how to interact with people, how to take rejection, how to kind of convince someone of something that you thought was true. Is that similar for you? How did you find that very early role of that commission role shape any of how you kind of then progressed in your career?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I've spoken with, colleagues and friends about it before. Very similar sentiment in many ways. I think the added complexity I had was quite young. I was 18 at the time. I was working with other people in those expos that were, late 20s, early 30s, older. and more experience, but my results, I guess, in many ways outperformed. There's a few reasons for that. I think it was the age and the sponge, which my brain was. I was constantly learning. I was watching what they were doing, adapting, iterating, tweaking, trying my own thing, trying to get it flowing and functional for me. And I was learning skills at a rapid rate. So I think it was a great foundational piece, definitely. It was very confronting, very challenging at the start, but if you apply yourself and you're willing to be a bit vulnerable and learn from others at the same time, that's where you'll get the best growth. And I guess definitely it enhanced, things like storytelling, influence, and sort of understanding language too, how you can twist someone's language that, is a no or leaning into a no, understand that and find the value, the emotional connection, and move them a different direction and potentially, turn it into a yes. So as a foundational piece, yeah, definitely, I align with you. It was very, very good and set a strong base for everything that sort of followed after.
And then so 20 years in the insurance industry after doing some faxes. And so did you go through a bunch of different parts of the organization, through claims, through underwriting? Like, can you talk to me around that? Have you really been across the organization through the supply chain?
Yeah, definitely. I know a fair few people in the market these days, and I think there's very few that have that sort of well-rounded aspect of a end-to-end business model. And I started in claims, like motor claims, as I said. I was looking after a taxi scheme and heavy motor at Zurich, in that thing, so it's quite challenging. I did that for about 18 months, moved to property liability claims in that same office in Adelaide, and did that for about 12 months. At that stage, I moved to underwriting. So I'd sort of done two or three areas of claims, and then moved to underwriting, and as a trainee underwriter, looking at property and motor in the Adelaide team, working up to Chris Horsnell, and learnt a lot from him on that, and then moved just to motor. So moved up to an underwriting role in motor, and at that point, it was Zurich started their Future Leaders program for the first year. I formed part of that cohort, and that exposure, getting that group together quite regularly, meeting, learning, and growing, sort of pushed me into a BDM role at Zurich. So within that Adelaide office, I'd sort of moved in every area and finished as a BDM or relationship role. At that point was when there's you're looking at ceilings and careers, and where I wanted to go. There was an opportunity within Adelaide at Zurich, and definitely if I was willing to move interstate, happy to. But I'm very at that point Adelaide driven, and UAA had the opportunity, and that they were looking for someone to take over their Adelaide stuff and build something, and it had obviously the skills that I could do, but also the growth that I wanted in building a business, leadership, that sort of thing. So moved into that, and then moved to an operations manager role. Did that for a while. That's when sort of the study at uni kicked in, and then moved to a regional manager role over in Singapore, setting up our stuff in Asia, and then came back to a regional manager role here, and then moved into our UAA Group executive team. So diverse,
amazing.
Yes.
Done it all. Mark, can I drag you back to your Singapore time? Yep. How? Because there's a bunch of folks that listen to the pod who are looking to grow internationally and understand that Asia is different to the UK and Europe, which is different to the US. And so can you talk to me about how did that come about? Like, how did you land in Singapore? How is it trying to build a business there? What were the maybe 2 or 3 takeaways that maybe they're unexpected that kind of you understood up from working there?
Yeah. I mean, I'll speak to it from a business perspective, but also the local market perspective too. It was the opportunity came about as I said, in that operations manager role. I was doing a bit of study. It's where I finished or completed my MBA, and then was engaging at that stage with the UAA, so pre-merger and pre-creation of the UAA Group, was just UAA and the UAA exec and management team, and I got invited to one of their offsites, which was a first for me, and very cool to be a part of and see how that all worked. And in those discussions were the Singapore stuff, which was sort of at that infancy stage of or conceptual stage where they're starting to turn an idea into the reality, and they're working through licensing, partnership, that sort of thing. So I sort of wasn't there from the start. I came in to roll out and sort of get to that, take over that execution piece. And definitely, you're talking about three takeaways. If you're looking to, you've really got to understand the market. It's quite easy to have an idea and to take that, as you say, UK or Australian way of working and doing things to a new country. But if you don't understand the idiosyncrasies in that market, the uniqueness, the ways of working, and adapt either your value prop or your product or your offering to accommodate where you can, but still not compromise the integrity of what you offer or what you're wanting to offer, that's the key. And we had a large piece of working through that in the Singapore market with the UAA product. It's a very different way of transacting that business or the policy structure compared to what was existing. They were using, existing Munich rewording, and we're coming in with a product that's, got 4 different policies into one. So the value's there, but it was 6 to 12 months of education of the market of what that meant, the benefits of it. That was definitely it. From a leadership perspective, it's that the Singapore specific, culturally diverse, very, very culturally diverse. So you've got to understand, how to conduct yourself, how to be adaptable, and essentially be a chameleon. And I pretty much went into it with a model of listening first and speaking last, and understanding everything before I spoke. And being vulnerable at times too, hearing what people had to say, taking it on board, admitting when I'd made errors, because you sort of want to be accepted in many ways, but understand and be seen to be respectful and that engaging, collaborative, whatever word you want to use, that's a key. You've got to understand the culture, and sort of the local market is probably 2 of the biggest things from a business perspective.
Interesting. And for those that don't know, I think many do, but for those who don't, can you give us a 2-minute snapshot of UAA and the business and scale, product focus, those kinds of things?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously legacy with my role as UAA over the last 2 years, we post merger of UAA and Mekon was the creation of the UAA Group, which is sort of like a umbrella company or a house of brands. So under the UAA Group, which I sit on the exec team for, there is a number of brands being Mekon in Australia and UAA in Australia. They're 2 of our biggest ones. Mekon being like construction insurance, so contract works, annual and single. UAA, plant machinery, mobile plant machinery. We've got operations in New Zealand with Mekon New Zealand and UANZ, and operations in Singapore, which is UAS and directly branded. We've also got an IP agreement with QBE in Hong Kong, which we act and sort of get royalty from in partnership with them. So it's quite sizable but our specialist markets are, mobile plant machinery and construction. And definitely, we're probably one of the, from a UAA size and a Mekon size in Australia, the sort of bigger players in those spaces, respectively.
The leader
without
there.
getting too much detail away.
No, that's perfect. That's super helpful. And when you obviously you yourself is very focused on distribution, and that's kind of part of what you do today. And I'm sure a key part of the group strategy is technology. And so, Mark, can you talk to me a little bit, without giving all your secret sauce away, around how you think about distribution and partnership, and then how you think about like core technology strategy to enable that?
Yeah, definitely. And I guess in short, they are very closely aligned in right now, but also going forward. I think that's where I guess a market shift is occurring, and definitely I'm seeing, and maybe hopefully others are too. But I guess like when you look at distribution and sort of like the distribution strategy role that I see and the partnership stuff, it's definitely changing. And I guess for me, when going back over my time, it used to be like, the distribution stuff used to be about scale, how many brokers could you reach, how visible your brand was, and how strong your traditional relationships were. And that model definitely worked in the market. And I guess from what I saw, it moved slower where I guess products were a bit more commoditized. But I don't see that being the world that we operate in now. Right now, I see, distribution or distribution strategy, whatever you call it, it's fundamentally about relevance. That's sort of how I see it. It's not enough to be known. You have to be valued, and what we're pushing across all our brands is that value-driven engagement. And I guess what that means is, you've got to understand who your partners are, what challenges they're facing, how businesses can support them in ways that they feel differentiated and commercially meaningful. I guess, we've moved from the broad and busy type model to a far more engaged, segmented, insight-led one, which is, providing early rewards so far. It's only the last 12 months we've sort of made that shift. And I guess more broadly, that's where I'm saying, we've spent time looking at and working with our broker network, not just in terms of volume, but the value piece being the key. And, who the brokers genuinely are that align with our proposition for our brands, who sees us as a strategic partner, not just another market. And, once you've identified those brokers, the question then becomes like, how do you invest in them? And the relationships and that in a way that delivers mutual value. Because I guess for me, it's no longer about touch points. It's more around the right touch points. And I go back, I've worked in that sort of area for a long time, and there's been a big shift, and I guess, what it's leaning more into now is that might be in the form of, co-developing market strategies with your distribution partners, bringing them into the fold on new product ideas and sort of feedback loops, and even, using them for claims feedback and identify service improvements, those sort of things. So, more so we're thinking about brokers not as distribution endpoints. It's moving internally and some of the market as well is into more of like a capability partner, if that makes sense.
It does, yeah.
People and brokers that can help us evolve our offer, pressure test the way we think and, open some new segments. But yeah, I guess another thing that's also changed is the expectation around speed, transparency, and also service. I think they're key. Definitely, they've always been there, but I guess that what I'm seeing now is that it has to move faster. And brokers, they're under more pressure now than ever. Their clients are under more pressure now than ever, and I guess they're looking and craving from what we're seeing and hearing is partners that can be proactive, responsive, and easy to deal with at the same time. So, our strategy includes a strong focus on service consistency, as you said, technology integration, to enable those frontline teams to act, quickly and meaningfully. But ultimately, I guess our view is, and what we're looking for and working towards is we want distribution in our group across all our brands to feel like a shared ecosystem, and not a one-way pipeline where you're just pushing and touching. You want that to be like two-way street, and everyone.
Pushing it down a pipe. Mark, when you think about that partnership and that distribution, that demand from the broker side on speed, do you in terms of that demand of speed, do you mean demand of, when you say service, is that on them, like on quote request? Is that on claims feedback? Like, can you kind of talk to me a little bit more about what that speed demand is from your broker network, and then how do you service that? Specifically, I'm interested in how you think about that one from a technology standpoint, in terms of, have you built kind of internal portals and platforms, and how have you kind of approached like making sure you can partner with that broker group?
Yeah, definitely. Like speed, I think it covers off pretty much every area. You want speed of communication, and that's the difficulty. You want speed, you want technology, but you don't want to compromise the relationship piece and the human touch. And I guess that's the difficult part for any business in this market, is how you move forward on a strategy and roll out change without losing, the pieces.
Leaving people behind.
And it's very easy to do that. You could do that, within months. But that solving that equation is probably the challenge and where success lies. We're working. We're spending a lot of time, money, and energy in that space now, being technology as an enabler. It forms part of our, long-term strategy, and there's quite a big investment underway at the moment. We're building out internal capabilities within our business with new teams. We've got a whole BizTech team now that are doing great things and leading
Awesome.
that charge. And there's a lot of skills and capabilities that are built into that team with IT experts, business analysts, program managers. So there's a lot occurring internally and working towards a model of at the start improving our internal ways of working, systems, technology to enable what we're hoping for, and then long-term view is to look at how that can be an external contributor. But definitely from a speed perspective, brokers need the now. The now is more important than ever, and that's mainly driven by client demand. It's brokers understand that if you ask for something, it might take some time, but clients don't, and that's the tricky bit to navigate. So I guess our view is enabling brokers with speed to service their clients above what competitors can or competing brokers can if not using us. So like we said, tying it back to that, it's a shared ecosystem. We're working together for a common goal, not here's your quote, we'll get it to you in 2 days. But tech does form a part of it. And we're undergoing that at the moment, this big transformation across the last 12 months and probably another 12 months in that project.
Yeah, they take a long time to really shift everything. I think the thing you mentioned there, I thought was really interesting. Obviously, the focus for us for the podcast is building tomorrow's insurer. Like, what does the insurer of the future look like? And you said something, I think you said it in passing, but I think it's actually pretty important, which is you've built an internal technology team within the organization. And I think that can be really easily overlooked because you kind of called out the skill sets being very different to just like normal insurance business skill sets, because they're very different. They have a different mindset. They have a different view on the world. You need to bring the very broad skill sets from engineering, from project management, from QA, all those different pieces. And that needs to be its own, almost at an arm's length, almost within the business to really drive the technology strategy. And so is that something very deliberate by you and the business to carve and build that kind of internal capability?
Yeah, definitely. As an exec group, so the last 2 years since the creation of UAA Group, which, as we said, is more of a service provider, house of brands. So we sit above and provide service and guidance, leadership to those brands. But as an exec group, we got to the point where we realised we had great people in our business. That's been a strong suit of us. We have big ambition. There's a lot that we want to achieve and tick off. But I guess, you hit that fork in the road where, are you equipped to deliver that at scale that we wanted? And there's a lot of we know what we want to do, but we didn't know the path to get there. And we made a very, very, educated call, big call, whatever you want to call it, to invest heavily in that build out of skill set and capability. And we had great support from the board and they're sitting behind us, supporting with what we're doing. But it's all about strengthening our teams and embedding, the program managers, business analysts, biz tech sort of stuff that we wanted to do. It is about structure, but it's more than structure. It's like you were alluding to. It's a space that creates clarity, alignment, and I guess some sustainable momentum too. It's definitely worked so far. I guess people in our business or our group and across our brands now feel that they can influence outcomes, not just respond to them. And that's a huge cultural shift that has occurred. And I guess from us, what we've seen is it sent the desired message where, strategy isn't everyone's job. It's not something just, it is everyone's job. It's not something just discussed in our leadership forums or offsites. So it's definitely built structure, flow, and given guidance to what we want to do and keeping us in check. That's all ticked, but there's bigger impacts than just the workload from a cultural perspective that's occurred and a different way of thinking within our organisation.
That makes sense. And have you generally had and the reason I bring this up is I'm actually on a roundtable in a couple of weeks' time, and the topic of that conversation is partner versus build. And this is an age-old thing, right? And there's pros and cons for both sides, I think, in terms of the different parts of the technology stack. And have you got a general belief within the business of how you kind of approach like core systems or ancillary systems, and whether you build them, whether you partner, or whether you go and buy a business? How do you think about that as a business?
I mean, like we're undertaking that now as a huge transformative project, and that's one of our fellow exec, Peter Ross. She's doing great amount of work in that space, and definitely can speak to it more in detail. But from my lens, it's a needs-based thing and a capability-based thing. Obviously, there's the age-old question of bang for buck money. If you're going to spend, what's the value? What's the ROI that you're looking at? And, in today's world where we're at, and obviously with the sort of Steadfast backing and that broader Steadfast group engagement, there's potentially that partnering model is looking more viable from a cost and expense perspective, from an ROI too. Like you're going to probably get more return on investment there. Definitely from our end, we get the benefit of scalability as well across all our brands, not just one that we're working on. But in saying that, it is, if you go that model, it's a large amount of work. Still, regardless of which way you go, it's a lot of work. I can see the level of work that Peter and her team go to. It's phenomenal. And there's still more to do in that space. So I don't know, I guess in many ways what the answer is, but, it depends on, for me, and how I would make a decision, what that ROI is at the end. What's the return on any of those variables? And that's where you want to go from a monetary perspective, but also from, an efficiency, time perspective, which one is going to be quicker, less risk, that sort of thing. So not my field of expertise by any means, but that's how I would view it, I guess, through my lens.
Yeah, look, and I agree with you. I think it's all super nuanced, and so I think I agree completely. You shouldn't have one single track. I think there'll be things that you want to build and own because you think they're really important and core to the business. Then there's these kind of maybe more tactical things that you want to try, and it doesn't make sense to do those and to build those. And so how can you lean on kind of partners to deliver them? I think that combined approach I think you just called out there is bang on the money. And I think you mentioned a little bit something earlier on around having really diverse brands as well. And having diverse brands, I'm interested you being on the exec around this, which is bringing brands together and bringing businesses together to kind of have an alignment on strategy and operations and customer delivery and consistency that you want to get from a group level. Can you maybe talk to some of the hurdles there, like some of the real challenges of doing that, of like bringing culturally those brands together and that having that, I guess, a model of having like an operational entity kind of driving strategy throughout the group?
Yeah, it definitely has been we refer to it as a transformational journey, the last, 18 to 24 months. And we're now at a point where, and to be honest, the creation of that new exec team was the catalyst for it. We had the merger, the new exec team formed, and we started to look at where we had gaps, where our blind spots were, and one of those early points was culture. We spent a lot of time and energy. We just talked around the build out of a biz tech team, for example, and the people there. But one thing we did before that, 2 years ago, we built out a P&C team. So we've got a great exec manager, Tracy Murphy, who leads that team, that function, has spent so much time and energy in that space. And definitely we built out the skill set capability in that team. It went from, a team of 1 to a team of 5 quite quickly. And I guess that was deliberate because we had to undertake that cultural work to get alignment, understanding. But one thing we wanted to keep and focus on was the identities of the brand. We don't want to lose those. But obviously, what you want with engagement is people to understand, not like, here's the strategy, but they want to understand the why, the how, and have that alignment. And the thing with having multiple brands is, and I was talking about this yesterday with someone else, is, if we can paint as an exec the vision for the future, that's our North Star, that's where we're going, we need to understand that those brands are going to have different paths and let them have different paths to get there. But our role is to keep, making sure that those paths are at some stage starting to converge and heading in the right direction. And that's very challenging because you've got to understand there's idiosyncrasies in each of those markets they target. The ways of working is a little bit different. The systems at the moment are different. They're legacy things that we're working through with that, tech stuff. But obviously they need to understand their part in that bigger piece of the puzzle, or bigger puzzle, and how we're all getting there and why we're going there, but making sure that those paths are sort of working towards the same thing. And I guess that's, from a strategy perspective, the importance of how we bring those brands together. From a cultural perspective, we spend a lot of time and energy in that space with external providers, internal work that we're doing. And, we've pretty much in Australia, we've got most of the states working in the same office now. We've spent a lot of money from a fit out perspective in offices, making sure they're consistent across states, but also co-branded, and everyone's reflected in their, who they work for, and it feels like their home. But we've done a lot of work with that P&C team around the ways of working and culture workshops, stuff like that over the last 18 months. And we've had our engagement scores over that time increasing. So it's been a big body of work, but very challenging. But in the end, in short, I guess if you're respectful of, the brand identity, the people's ways of feeling about those brands that they work for, but making sure that they somehow tie back into this bigger picture, that's the important thing.
Amazing. I want to, can we gaze into the future a bit, Mark?
Sure.
I want to gaze into the future a little. And the agency game is changing, right? It's been changing for a while. It feels like the snowball, the momentum is like really continuing to accelerate. And so, have you got any general view on kind of what the future of agencies might look like? Are they going to evolve beyond kind of niche distribution engines and become like something much broader?
Yeah, definitely. I think absolutely right. When we're looking at underwriting agencies, it's I think we're only at the start of the evolution of agencies, and they definitely have changed. When I left Zurich to make that switch to UAA, it was then it was very taboo. Underwriting agencies, oh, why are you leaving Zurich and going to something risky? Underwriting agencies, they're not sustainable. Now they're one of the largest beasts in this market and growing. So, yeah, I definitely think they were traditionally seen as niche players, as you said, distribution engines, with, very deep relationships, a product focus and sort of being experts, but often very limited in scale or influence compared to insurers. I think it was very relevant. But for me, over especially the last 3 to 5, and most recent 3 years being definitely that I've seen that perception change. I think what we're seeing now and what we're working towards as, I guess, a future agency is, like you said, it's not just a channel, it's a strategic force. You're seeing agencies step into roles that were once exclusive to insurers in many ways, and like product innovation, service model design, which we're talking about, data enablement, even customer experience leadership. Like they're all sort of being led in many times by the underwriting agency, and the lines between the insurer and agency model and a tech partner to some degree, like you said, if you internalize it, is starting to blur a lot. And I guess for me, that's a positive shift for the market. I guess in many ways that means more agility. Brokers are seeing more specialization, more responsiveness, and that's a benefit that we need to work towards. But I guess I don't know what drives it, but from my end, I think driving that change has been the realization that, being a distribution specialist isn't enough anymore. Agencies that we're seeing successful, they're thriving right at the moment are the ones that deeply understand their segment, whether it's, mobile plant machinery, construction, SME, whatever it is, something else, it's indispensable. But I guess, it's not just about capacity anymore. That's what it used to be. It's about capability. And there is this growing blurred line of, where underwriting agency would understand the product, have the capacity and distribute it. It's now, like we're doing, we're building out our own stuff. We're using data and doing what an insurer historically would do in many ways. And like you said, if you internalize that tech, you're starting to blur a number of different entities into one, which is really, really good. And I think there's a number of our brands, but brands within that underwriting agency space that are leaning into that shift and actively investing in areas like data analytics, underwriting efficiency, digital broker engagement's been a big one as well. I think there's been a lot happening in that space, and many guests on your podcast have sort of worked through that too. So I guess they're definitely all capabilities that I and many probably once saw as like an insurer's domain. Underwriting agencies don't need to be playing in that space or doing that, but it's not just about premium growth anymore. It's definitely about relevance, retention, and reputation from an agency space, which is growing in everywhere in the world, pretty much.
So much room for scale, right? I think that's the point there. There's so much room for scale, and if you kind of find product fit, get the right team, get the right technology, and like you called out there, like pulling kind of core components that you used to lean on insurers for, but actually bringing that capability into the agency. There's an enormous opportunity here. Mark, I could literally talk to you all day. I'm going to ask you one more question, if that's okay. Yeah. And we're sitting down in this pod 5 years time. What does UAA look like? What's the business look like? What's that North Star that you tried to describe today? What does agency land look like, and then how does UAA fit into that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I always love those look into the future 5 year things. I'd love to look back in 5 years and see how many of these I've made that are actually reality and were true. That'd be really cool.
Don't worry, Mark. I will jot this down and I'll put a date in the diary already for 5 years, and we'll catch up and we'll see how many have been ticked.
Nice. I like that idea. I think from a broader market, 5 years, I think we're underestimating how quickly customer experience will become a differentiator. More broadly in commercial insurance, I think the demand of the customer on brokers, on insurers is increasing. And I guess that used to be something like get the quote out, process the claim, but I guess there's a bit of a mindset shift. I remember I was having a conversation with a broker a while ago, and they made a comment that just resonated and aligned with exactly this. Like, I don't want just fast service. I want to feel like you're ahead of me. You're taking me on a journey. You're working with me, and that did stick with me because it's not just about speed for the sake of speed. Anyone can achieve that. Roll out a digital platform, like we said, but it's about giving people confidence in every interaction and helping them be beneficial to their clients and achieve success too. That comes back to that shared ecosystem model. But I guess if we're providing 5 years time, I think the underwriting agency space, you're looking at combining real-time insight, proactive service. But like I said, the challenge will be how everyone evolves to roll out those, but keep that human element, because that's a critical factor in any success of a business. I think that's the winning formula. And I think it's not something you can just bolt on. Like we said, I think it has to be built with how you think, how you lead as a business, and how you operate across the whole business too. So we're spending a lot of time and energy in that space now, and not saying by any means we've got the answers, but it's something we're actively conscious of and working towards. So going 5 years time, I would hope that UAA Group and our brands are definitely, leaning into that model and sort of have adapted and are market leading in that space. As a business, I know where we want to go in the next 5 years and our strategic plan. We're heavily centered around growth, customer experience, and sort of the sort of brand aspect of it all, but also making sure that we've got capability and profitability in our business too. We don't want to trade off the portfolio aspect. It's an important part, especially respectful of our securities the various securities we have for our brands. And I guess, we know our value prop, we know the products we have, and the way we can lead with those, and, not sort of painting a picture or telling any untruth, but I guess you can tell where we're looking to head when you look at, we're two Australian-based brands that came together. We've now got operations in New Zealand, in Singapore. So maybe there is future expansion, that might be occurring, but definitely it aligns with that growth mindset. And from an agency perspective, as I said, I think there's a lot of work, to do, but I think if whoever can nail those pieces I was talking about, they're going to be the ones that are going to be market leading.
Well, we'll wait to see in the news over the next couple of years, Mark, what these potential growth acquisition might look like. And you have to, there'll be lots more office fit outs. You have to put lots more brands alongside. So that, I think that office fit out bill is going to keep on getting bigger. Look, Mark, that is a bigger side. Look, thank you so much for your time today. Look, it's been brilliant. Obviously, I've been watching UAA from afar for a long time, so it's been really nice to kind of sit down, have a chat, understand kind of how the business is going and where where the vision goes to. Look, so thank you so much for your time today, Ivan. I've really appreciated it.
The feeling's mutual, Nigel. Definitely thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure to clear the initial nerves and just have a great conversation about, some very relevant topics for me and stuff that I like to talk about. So appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mark. Well, look, everybody listening, I hope you've enjoyed the episode as much as I have. If you do want to see Mark and I beautiful faces, you can head over to YouTube and you can see us there. And as always, if you want to hear more from industry leaders who are pushing the boundaries in insurance, please do check out our other episodes of our podcast series, Building Tomorrow's Insurer. So thank you. Jump over LinkedIn, jump over Twitter, links in the description below. Thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful day.